I'm Dwayne of Revelation Cable, and this is the Beer and Gear Show, where we review a couple beers and talk about gear. And today we have Chris Young from Union Tube and Transistor Pedals. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we always start with the beer. That's a good place to start. Today we have Hoyne Brewing Company, the Dark Matter. It's a stout. You into stouts?
On occasion, I've been known to partake.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I like this beer. This is one I've had before.
It's nice.
Yeah.
I could drink one of these.
We're going to do that.
Okay.
All right. So the first time I heard about you was I saw the Jack White pedal.
Sure.
But why don't you tell me how Union started?
Union started, there used to be a store in Vancouver called Not Just Another Music Shop. And I worked there. And I put on some pedal building workshops and brought in a fellow named Kirk Elliott to do those with me. And he'd done them at other shops before. And we did a few of those where you'd come in and you'd spend a few hours and you'd build a pedal, and people would learn about pedal building. And after we'd done a few of them, I had the idea to make a run of pedals, and approached him with an idea, and I just asked him how hard he thought it would be, and he sort of said, "Well, it's not that difficult, but if you built it and it didn't work, would you know how to test it?" And I said, "No, that's certainly not my area of expertise." And he said, "Well, why don't we do it together?" So we partnered together and built a run of pedals and sold them out, and said, "Oh, that was easy." And then built some more pedals and didn't sell those out. Like, "Oh, that's not so easy." But just kept doing it. And after a few years, the look changed. So we went from we were using originally trophy shops to engrave our pedals, and went to the badge that people think of, I think now, is probably what the look of the company is, and sort of rebranded and try to bring it into one solid look. And just sort of kept going from there.
Well, that's one thing that I really like, is there's a certain uniformity to all your pedals, and the branding is very classic.
Yeah, I wanted something that looked classic, even maybe if it wasn't classic under the hood. So we've taken stuff and tried to maybe hide how we've changed things, or make it not so obvious, so that people. The feel for people should be that it's very classic, the tones are very classic, but there's probably some stuff hidden in the designs that maybe people aren't going to necessarily know or have to think about. So, yeah. Well,
there's certain simplicity to the way the pedals are. It's like very easy to set things.
Yep. That comes from there's two probably reasons for that. One is my background, which is in design and in music stores, and then Kirk's background, which is in studios, and what we kind of always said was we wanted somebody to be able to plug something in and very quickly know yes or no. Not to have to dive through menus or spend a bunch of time. They should very quickly be able to pick up and go, this works for us, or this doesn't work for us. Mm-hmm. And because working in the studios, both him and myself, we would always have these things where it's like, yeah, you could spend hours and dial something in on this other thing, but could you quickly grab something and, like, in a few seconds, no, this works or it doesn't, and you move on, or you've done it. And we've done a lot of stuff where we make choices behind the scenes for people, so that could be anything from how much distortion to the frequency range to just how simple, the ins and outs are. But we try to really eliminate choices for people when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's a good way to do it where you don't have to kind of worry about anything. You just dial it in, you're ready to go.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I'm both sides of that coin. I'm both the guy who will dive deep into a MIDI based system that can be more complex, but for the products that we design, for the most part, I want them to be very clean, very simple. Right now, we haven't exceeded 3 knobs on anything that we do, and we do have things with no knobs. So.
Right. Well, that's one thing I was going to say. It's like, when you're going up for simplicity, the no knob pedal is
So about as simple as you get, yeah.
Well,
And we have stuff even with like no on-off switch even, so there's stuff where it's always on.
Yeah. So tell me how you got into working with Jack White.
So superstitiously, for the longest time, we wouldn't make the serial number 13. And we didn't really have a big budget for advertising, and so what we would do was, when we got to the serial number 13, we would skip it, and we would make a serial number that was an artist's name who we liked. And so we had this list of artists that we were really into, and every time we got to 13, so 13, 113, 213, we would pick an artist, and they would get a free pedal at that serial number. So maybe they're unlucky, I don't know. But we sent him one of our more pedals, and there was some back and forth about how they liked it, and would we work on it, and would we do some custom stuff for them. And in the end, I just said, we could just make you something. Like, we could just do that. And we went down to Nashville and met with their team and sort of brought some concepts and some different sounds. And very quickly, he said, I like the sound of that one, and I like the look of that one. And the look of one was one with no controls, that's what we sort of went with in the end, was something where there was just an on-off switch and no other controls. So super, super minimalist vibe. And we put them out. And at that point, we were not online. We didn't actually have a web presence. We'd done sort of all of our marketing and advertising had all been really guerrilla stuff that we'd done through things like we would drop off T-shirts at thrift stores and just give pedals away, but we weren't online. We didn't have a website. And so when we launched the pedal with Third Man that same week, the pedal for them went on sale on Black Friday, and on Wednesday we put up our website. So we kind of went from 0 to 100 in a lot of people's minds because no one had ever heard of us before.
Right.
It was an okay way to sort of up your game.
Yeah.
So keeping it very down low for about 7 years, and then sort of all of a sudden you're there.
Yeah. For sure. It gives you a good rep when you got somebody backing you like that.
Yeah. Couldn't ask for a better client. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you talked about the Moore pedal being the first one you brought to him. I think that was probably the first pedal of yours that I had tried. And I was kind of blown away by how much gain that thing has on tap.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. There's still people who say, like, we've got the loudest clean boost on the market. Ours does 30 dB of. It's like, yeah, no, sorry, man. Ours does nearly 40. So, I think ours is the loudest clean boost on the market. It's essentially one of Kirk's old designs. It was a mic pre that he designed and then developed into a pedal version. So it's like taking a studio grade mic pre and adding it to your pedal board. And you can actually plug microphones into it and use it as a mic pre. So that's, I think, there's a track on the first Jack White record where he actually uses it as a mic pre into an amplifier, and then they record the amplifier as the vocal sound.
Right.
Yeah.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered making an actual mic pre out of that design?
We have talked about over the years of like the idea of trying to get into 500 or rack mount stuff. I think the one right now that we've had the most interest in, and would actually make sense because it would actually perform almost the same, is the compressor. So for sure people love the compressor and are using it in the studio. And the one request we have is a balanced stereo version of that. And in fact, if you had that, it's almost as much gain. So the Moore starts at +5 and goes to +40. The compressor, if you ignore the compression, starts at unity and goes to +35. So you could actually use it as a mic pre as well. Right.
I think I read that you were thinking about doing a tube DI. Is that correct?
Every once in a while there's these, what should we do? Why would we do it? And right around the time we finished the compressor, we've been working on a what I've been calling a resurrection. So my partner used to make a guitar splitter so that you could run multiple amps in the studio. And as we were developing that, I said, "Do you have any other ideas? Have you ever done any other studio projects?" And he said, "I made a DI." I said, "Oh, okay. How many did you make?" And he said, "One." I said, "Okay. Where is it?" He said, "Garth has it." Garth being Garth Richardson. And I said, what does he think of it? He says, "I don't know." What do you mean you don't know? He said, "I gave it to him." I was like, "Well, how much did you charge him for him?" He's like, "I didn't. I just gave it to him." I was like, "Okay, this is no way to run a business." So I got on the phone to Garth and said, "Hey, Garth, do you have a DI that Kirk gave to you?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." It's like, is it good?" He's like, "It's fantastic. I've used it on every album since I got it." Okay, maybe
good idea to make some more.
Maybe that would be an idea for a product to be made. And Kirk, one day when I was over at his house, sat me down and said, "Do you have an hour?" And I said, "Yeah." And he basically took me through a very technical drawing of why this DI is unlike other DIs. Part of it is the tube nature of it, but also part of it is the grounding scheme, which doesn't require a ground lift like every other DI that you've ever used.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you can be in it, you can be into an amp, and if you unplug either thing, you're not going to end up with a ground loop, even though that would happen in almost any other DI. So, again, one of those, like, it's super, super complicated to do that, but it just works invisibly behind the scenes, and people go looking for the ground switch, because, like, you don't need it, and people don't believe you when you don't need it, and then they try it and you don't need it, and then they are impressed. So
right. I think you need to get that made.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Tell them to get that made.
Yes, write in and let us know your interest in a tube DI for, yeah.
I think pre-sale. Pre-sale sounds like a good.
Yeah, maybe, yes, that would be good. I hate pre-sales. We did it with the compressor, and I just felt so bad when there's like a month delay or something, and then I just felt awful and just had to write everybody and apologize. And I know people are okay.
They don't care that much. Yeah, it happens.
It bugs me. It bugs me more than it bugs them, I'm sure. But I always feel bad. It's like, I've got your money, and you're never getting your product. But yeah,
nice. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of studio stuff that you could be doing and putting into the 500 series. It would be
nice. I mean, 500 is nice because of the low threshold for investment, but it's a little just harder to, I mean, for us anyways, the way that we work, because we're such traditionalists, doing rack mount or standalone pedals actually gives us more control. We don't have to rely on another system. So we can, if someone says yours doesn't work, and it's like, well, that's the power you're using, or that's this and that, the other that you're using. Even with some of our pedals, we have to explain to people, like, if you think there's a problem with it, try running it on a battery, and is the problem still there? It's like, yes, that's a problem with your power. So,
right.
I mean, and that's, there are things that people can do to work around that stuff, but it's very hard once you get out in the real world to control some things that people are going to do, and so you try and make it as foolproof as possible, but people can still be fools.
Sure enough.
Yeah.
Here we have your lab compressor.
Yeah.
Which I've played through, and it sounds amazing. Yep. So you based that on the LA which?
Well, okay, so usually if I'm sitting down with people for the first time, I'll say, do you know what an LA2 is? Because it's more famous, it's more iconic, and people will go either yes or no. If they say yes, I say, well, the LA2 is tube, and the LA3 is solid state, and that this is essentially a compact LA3. But the characteristics of the two are very similar. So very fast attack, very slow release, very, very, I don't want to say transparent, but a very, sometimes for people that don't understand compression, it's hard to put your finger on what it's doing, but it is a very, it's like a studio, again, it's another one of these ones where people are used to a Dynacomp or like a Boss compressor that has an attack that you can hear. And this is another case where you've taken a piece of studio gear and we put it on your pedal board. So we're taking something that would be recording gear classically and put it in front of the amp instead of after the amp.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. And you've kind of gotten that into a lot of studios.
It's definitely, I mean, it's opened us to a whole new crowd that we had never experienced before. So, I think the the field of fuzz pedals is very crowded, and even if we're doing something unique in that field, it's very easy to get lost, and it's super particular for people's tastes. But this is one where there are some other fantastic compressors. The Cali 76, the Diamond, the Empress, I think are all really impressive. But it introduced us to a crowd that probably we weren't on their radar before. Mm-hmm. So for sure there was players using our stuff and studio guys using it, because you can take something like a Radial XTC box and then use this at studio level. So you can put it on vocals, you can put it on drums, you could put it on your master monomix if you have a monomix. But that's led to the question of could we do a rack mount stereo version, and I'd love to do that, but we just have our hands full right now with other things, including the amps and just keeping up with what our pedal demands are.
Right. You had to do some serious custom work to kind of get that thing going, right?
It was the longest we've ever spent developing a product. I mean, an average development for us might be 2 or 3 months. The Moore pedal was bordering on a year, and the compressor was almost 2 years. The big setback in the compressor was the optocouplers, and we've actually made our own optocouplers. So the 3 big black things you see in there are optocouplers, and each one of them is custom made by us. So they're not something that somebody can get off the shelf, and they are the heart and soul of that product. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thousands and thousands of dollars down the rabbit hole to make that happen. But it's been good. It's well on our way to be one of our better selling products, and yeah.
Your name has for a long time implied tubes, yet you sell pedals that don't have tubes.
Yeah, and I don't like pedals with tubes in it. It's one of those people always say, "Oh, does it have a tube in it?" And like, no. It's like, why are you calling yourself that? And the real reason was that I had visions of doing other tube products that I liked. A tube DI being one of them. A tube amp being one that I had, in the back of my mind for years. In fact, when I originally envisioned the company, it was as an amplifier company, but I just couldn't afford to get my foot in the door that way.
It's pricey.
It's very pricey, and like that thing where we would give away an artist pedal, we can't really afford to give away amplifiers, so they're high end enough that we have to cover those costs. You know, a pedal is an expensive thing to get away, but if it equals a Jack White customer or some other really good customer spreading the word, then it is worth it. So the amp launched last year, or either late 2018 or early 2019. I'm actually not positive. I have to look back when the first one left the building, but there's a few of them out there now, less than a dozen. It's the concept for me was if a company like Matchless had done Fender instead of Vox, what would that amp be like? Mm-hmm. And I looked at my favorite Fender amps, what I liked about them, if there was any limitations to them. I play Fender amps a lot, and there's a few things that I do to them right out of the box just to make them more friendly to what I'm after. And one of the biggest ones is changing the speakers. But what had happened was I was flipping through an old tube amp schematic book and came upon this thing where I was looking at a Princeton Reverb and a Deluxe and a Vibrolux, and I kind of went, they're somewhat different, but knowing what I know about power, pardon me, I know that they're not as different, I think, as people would like to believe, or as maybe Fender marketed them. I know they were sort of small, medium, large. But the concept that I sort of thought was that I felt like the speakers made a bigger difference than the actual amp itself. And so at the time I owned all 3, a Princeton Reverb, Deluxe Reverb, Vibrolux Reverb. I took them down to my space, and we started just swapping cabinets. So plug the Princeton into the Vibrolux, probably the Vibrolux into the Deluxe into the Princeton. And what we kind of came up with was that the cabinet made a really big difference, but the amp itself was not huge. It wasn't as significant, I think, as people would like to believe. And so we thought if we could take the simplicity of the Princeton, do some upgrades, do some just modern build things that were maybe unique, that we could take that and make almost like you had all 3 amps in 1 amp. So this combo is one 10-inch, one 12-inch, and you can have one 10-inch, one 12-inch, or both. So as a 10-inch, you kind of have a beefier Princeton. As a 12-inch, you've got a deluxe. And a 10 and a 12, you actually have this sort of really cool thing where you get mixed harmonics from the speakers. So it's Matchless did a thing, I think, where they would mix speaker power, so you do 25 and 30 or something like that. And you'd get one would always break up before the other. And this one you get actually like just different tones as you mix the 2 speakers. So for the studio, it's really unique. I've talked to country bands where the guy's like, I want 10 inches in my ear, and the guy at front of house wants a 12-inch, and they can actually have both in 1 amp. Just things like that, things from being on the road where amps would break down and how they got serviced, just trying to fix those little things as we could. So yeah, the idea was just to do what I thought I would want a Fender to be. I think Milkman's doing kind of the same thing. He does such great work. Milkman, awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't want to do a range. I wanted to do one model. I kind of like the idea of doing one single model,
Right.
and not a whole range of amplifiers. So it's nominally 19 watts, which is really quite a bit louder than people think, especially given that we have 2 60-watt speakers. So we have 120 watts of speaker driven by a 19 watts amp. So you've got a lot of volume, a fairly, not as heavy as, about as heavy as an Irelux, a little bit more than a Deluxe, but not much. But way less than a Twin, way less than an AC30.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I feel like people are getting a little more lazy when it comes to carrying amps.
For sure, and this is even on the big side, I think, of what some people would find reasonable. But for the studio, it's great. For live, if you get a sound man who says you're too loud, you can just actually take out a speaker, and your volume will drop significantly. So it's almost like having an extra cabinet that you can take out or take in with just the flip of a switch.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much production do you think you're going to be?
They're pretty low. We've partnered with somebody, and they didn't want to commit to doing a lot of them. So I think originally I asked him to commit to doing a dozen, and we're almost at that point now where we're nearing the end of the dozen. So it would be whether or not he wants to continue doing it beyond that. I'm hopeful. I like it. It was a lot of work to get here. It's probably been over 8 years in the making, just even for these ones. And I feel like we've gotten rid of most of the bugs that I know of that could have happened in it. I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. I played the prototype myself for about a year in my space before we sold the first one, just to sort of feel if it was good. And I was as happy as I've ever been with my tone, so I was okay to let them go out in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. So beer number 2, and we've decided to stick with Hoyne, and it's called the Gratitude Winter Warmer. And I think it will definitely keep you warm since it's 9%. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's nice. It's got like kind of a bit of a caramel thing going on there.
Not so. I think like usually they're more like Christmas ones are more spicy. It's not so spicy. It's okay. I'm good with that.
It's good. Here is the
Zarbamba.
Yeah. So looks very kind of Russian muff.
Sure. So I mean, definitely the look we borrowed from the idea of Russian military, but it isn't strictly speaking a Russian muff. It is a muff-ish design, but like anything, we would sort of start with a why do a muff? If you're going to do a muff, why do a muff? And the answer sort of for me was, well, what don't I like about muffs? And it's like, well, muffs they can be noisy. I feel like I try them in the store and I like them a lot, and then I try them in the band context and they get lost. At one point when we were looking at old muffs, specifically a Russian one, which again, not what that is, but my partner opened it up, looked at it, held it up and pointed at my face and said, "This is why the Russians lost the Cold War." And I laughed But he was not wrong. They were terrible. It was terribly, terribly, terribly built. So, like, okay, if we can improve on the build, if we can improve on the size, if we can improve on the noise, and fix the problem where it sits weird, what would that look like? So this is 15 dB quieter than a standard muff. It's 5 dB louder than a standard muff. And it's an original EQ design. Beyond that, our wires are all color-coded, which we do so repair people can sort of make sense of it and not be in there with things which is all one color wire, which drives me bonkers when I'm trying to work on repairs. It uses the same approach that all of our stuff does. So the 4 bolts on the face that hold on the badge, if there is a badge, have 4 standoffs inside the unit, and the circuit board is mounted those standoffs. None of the pots, jacks, power, switch, LED, none of that touches the circuit board. So, I mean, it touches it, but not physically. If you break your foot switch, if you break a jack, you're not going to break the circuit board. So it becomes very more repairable.
It definitely looks like it's much easier to work on than some pedals I've seen.
And a little bit more pedal board friendly. And then, with the EQ, it actually becomes really clinical, so you can be very surgical about where it sits in a mix, which makes it easier to work in a band context. Yeah.
Well, I did see that you cover up some of your chips and things.
Sure. I mean, we like to protect our designs. I don't want them to be unrepairable, so we don't goop boards. But we're certainly going to make it harder for somebody. It's not impossible, but I mean, if someone knows their stuff, they could figure it out. But just a little bit harder for somebody maybe that's hoping to just straight strip us off.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of guys out there that make clones at half the price.
Yeah, and like honestly, like cloning is flattery, and I'm certainly, like, when we started off doing the workshops, it was copies of an old fuzz face is what we were starting with. Many people do, but when we put time into a new design, we're going to protect that. We're not trying to make it impossible to repair. We're not trying to make it that, and we stand behind all of our stuff. So if people send it back, we fix stuff even outside of warranty. We always repair stuff. We have a very small percentage that comes back to us. It's about 1% of our stuff that comes back for warranty or repair. And I'm happy to do it. I like companies that support their stuff. I was actually I've been really praising Electro-Harmonix recently for their repair practice, which is a flat fee. If you get it back to New York, it's like a $20 or $30 flat fee to have your stuff repaired, even out of warranty.
That's great. It's
just amazing. It's unbelievable. I don't know anybody else who does anything like that. It's unparalleled. Yeah.
Great. So there's a couple pedals. I know, this isn't a direct clone of a muff.
Yeah.
And then you also have, this is your tour bender, but then you also have the Sound bender.
Sound benders, the Sound bender we're pretty much phasing out, so we probably have enough parts to make 4 more, maybe a few less. So the Sound bender, we wanted to do a 60s fuzz, and again, with anything, it was like, why do it? What's good, what's bad? And so there was, which 60s fuzz, for instance. But when I started thinking about it in my head, I was like, what does 60s fuzz mean to me? And I kind of went the two Jimmies. There's Jimi Hendrix and there's Jimmy Page. When you're talking Hendrix, and you're not talking Octavia, you're talking fuzz face. You're talking Jimmy Page, you're talking a tone bender. And those are similar, but what do I like about them? Well, a fuzz face, if you roll your volume off, it breathes, cleans up. And I like that. A lot of our pedals try to have that characteristic to them, where if they have dynamics to them, if you ease off on your touch, if you dig in, there's a difference there. It's not just sandwiching on top of your sound. And tone bender has this singing gain to it that is really, really nice. It's really classic. Excuse me. And I thought if we could just sit right in between those two, if you were in the magic spot between a fuzz face and a tone bender, what would that be? And I think that's sort of what we got to with the Sound bender, which was germanium. And then we tried to fix other problems. So comparatively, they're not that loud by modern standards. So we added 20 dB of gain.
It's a pretty decent amount of gain.
Fair amount of gain. They don't like to be after buffered pedals, so if you have a Boss tuner, they'll respond better before than after, so we tried to fix that problem. They don't want to be on a daisy chain. We tried to fix that problem. They're big. Our size is just smaller. That fixes that problem. They don't have an indicator light. Fix that problem. So just trying to bring that thing into a modern player's pedal board. And after we'd been out for a while, I tried to sell the fellow from War on Drugs on the idea of the Sound Bender, and he said, I don't use them on the road. They're just too temperamental. They're too heat sensitive. And the light bulb went off in my head that we should do a silicone version, and that was the Tour Bender. So it was originally for him. I made one and gave it to him, but I don't think he's ever used it in any significant way. But that was where the impetus for it came, and it's what's on my pedal board right now. I love it. It's a little bit, just a smidge brighter than our germanium version, but I've got people out there who've ordered both and keep both.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, again, one of those. Why do it? And if you're going to do it right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I remember you talking about the Sound Bender, and you were trying to find those germanium parts.
Yep.
And that's a bit of an issue.
Yeah. So we would buy lots of 100, and then would take an 8-hour day to test that 100. And of that 100, we would get 20 usable ones. And of those 20 usable ones, we would be looking for Q1, Q2, Q3. And you might get, say, 11 of Q1 and 6 of Q2 and 3 of Q3. So you can make 3 pedals with that. So 8 hours of testing to make 3 pedals, and we were charging the same price as we were. We were kind of burying that cost and not telling people. I've always sort of wanted with our pedals for people to choose it based on what they wanted, not on the difficultiness for us or the price of it necessarily. So there's some of our pedals I feel like where you're getting a good deal, some of our pedals where we're getting a good deal, and the Sound Bender for sure and the Lab are ones where you are getting very, very good deals compared to like our time investment and parts and stuff. But I always wanted people to choose based on what they wanted, not necessarily have to think about why is this cheaper or more expensive. Or,
right.
Yeah. So there are some things like that where we hide that stuff, but it's mostly to try to make it level.
Yeah. I think that happens with most businesses where, some products you're making more profit and some you aren't, and you have to balance that out.
Yeah, for sure. And even now what we've done to try to make it easier for people, because we had a bunch of people. I'm on the forums just like anybody else, and I don't try to ever dismiss people's concerns or think that that they're wrong. I just think some people don't know or don't understand. And so I've got 2 things. One is that most people don't complain about the sound or the build. They complain about the price. That was one big one that we've had. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 things where that's played out. One was when we released the product with Third Man, somebody complained about our prices and said, "What are they? Are they made by Canadian tone druids?" And I went, "Ooh, I like that." Yes, I actually think we kind of are tone druids in a way. So we made a product called the Tone Druid. I was trying to find the dude online. I can't find the statement anymore, but it's out there somewhere. And
get in touch.
I have to thank you for giving us a product name. But the other one was that I recently tried to think of how could we get the price down. And so we introduced our parallel line called the Bean Counters, which are the same enclosures, the same circuit boards, same quality jacks, same quality pots, same quality foot switch, but no box, no bandana, no badge. The badge is just silk screened, and are offering those at a reduced price. And that's been doing well for us. It's actually, I think people are starting to catch on that there's really no difference as far as tone goes. Mm-hmm. It's a few little aesthetic elements, and if people don't need the wood box on their pedal board, which you actually don't.
Yeah.
It's a good way to get into our stuff at a real reasonable price. There's some stuff that we're not doing in that because of the extra labor. So things like our Nevermore or the Lab aren't going to have bean counter versions as far as in the near future. But almost everything else, I think we put out. Maybe not the crackle and pop, but most of that's just to do with them being low sellers.
Right. So one of the things that I've noticed is there's not a lot of demos online about your gear.
Right.
I've seen a couple things where I'm just like, yeah, I don't think that's really kind of getting to what this pedal does. The only one that I've seen that I thought did a really good job was Pete Thorne.
Sure. Pete Thorne's done 2 demos of 2 of our products. No. 1 demo of 2 of our products? I don't know how to get the math wrong. Okay, so he did a Bumble Buzz demo and he did a Tone Druid demo.
Okay, I was the Tone Druid.
Yeah, and they were both great. He does fantastic demos. Those were actually those were a collaboration with Vintage King. Vintage King was responsible for those demos getting done. But they were fantastic. And part of it is that I dislike most people's demos. There's a few people that I think do things really well. If I could get Andy from Reverb to do all my demos or Pete Thorne to do all my demos, I'd probably be a happy man. But those guys are professionals that have full plates. And there's, my desire to have some dude in his white socks in his basement doing my demos is pretty low. And I get lots of requests for it. We're probably almost done, aren't we, for time? Am I supposed to open my store? I'm supposed to open my store. I have a store too. We carry Revelation cables at our store as well.
Yeah, if you need some.
Yeah.
Just saying. All right.
Anything else?
No, I think we're done. All right. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hoyne Brewing. You did not sponsor this, but you could next time. Just saying. All right. Goodbye.
The Beer and Gear Show is brought to you by Revelation Cable Company. Please like, subscribe, and comment below.